Lesson 1. Open up first. I spit a poem on the first day and my students looked at me jaw drop. My story, immigrant kid. Started off with a hard knock life, watched my mom get job after job, give up her luxuries to get me through college. When people first see me, they don't see the story. They see a girl who's submissive and quiet, live and go mountain American dream, but I broke it all. The stereotypes, the prerequisite of Asian American model minority, and my kids, they saw this, that I'm not here to be something I'm not. They related to me not because I grew up in their hood or because I look like them, because I'm neither of those. It's because they could touch a fringe of my narrative and feel a sense of home, of familiarity, and that's what honesty can do. It brings us closer together, lesson 2. My kids, they have some good stories to tell. I gave my students a PowerPoint of data, demographics, inequalities, and they looked at the numbers and they said they already knew all this because they live these realities each day. They are far from oblivious to the system, telling me how cops roll down certain avenues more often, how their pops gets pulled over because he looks a little bit suspicious, yet they're still young, not yet jaded, still look at the world with wide eyes, no matter how many gunshots or drive-bys, they just need some place to speak at lesson 3. Give them the space to just be. See, literature is more than just about white people writing down their thoughts. It's about us, our very existence, our heartbeat. And that's all I wanted for my kids to get that learning is a part of who they are, and they got it. Knew what it meant for Ponyboy to get caught up in gang life. Knew what it meant for Keno to get greedy and destroy his family because they seen fathers disappoint them. Know that the world is unfair at times, and sometimes you need a little more than the money to survive. And this is critical thinking. This is Common Core, dismantling the master's house with the tools they gained from 7th grade toolkit, pen, blank page, and their version of American history. Tell them to write it out. Rose from concrete, lesson 5, lesson 4, let's talk about family. See, I already know when a kid has their family on his mind when he walks in because he's gotten it written all over his forehead. See, every student has a story and may not be ready to say it today, but there's something in their lurking like anger or depression or resilience. And with all this, I know some days they don't feel like coming to class. Some days all they got from me is these eulogies because I know this because I was one of those immigrant kids. When things went down at home, I didn't go to school. I ditched. I didn't try harder. I shut down and quit. And I don't want this for my kids. Don't want them to think that the burden is too big. It's too big because it was never meant to carry it alone. Lesson 5. See, we're in this together. It was never about becoming the 5-star teacher and teaching like a champ can't teach. It wasn't always about the strategy or the pedagogy or backwards planning. It was always about the unseen things, like learning to listen and loving. See, I got down on my knees and I prayed for my kids to ask God to show me how to be there. And so I do a few things now. When I open the door, I greet them, welcome them into the room. We sit on the table, break bread, listen. And this is when we start learning. Cool, what's up? Hi. My name is Jacqulyn Whang, and I am obviously a poet. I am God-fearing. I am someone who watches anime. I love hip-hop, obviously, too. And I'm a high school teacher at Centennial High in Compton. I'm going into my 3rd year at Centennial. I started teaching about 7 years ago. Let's give it up for all the teachers in the world. These are some rough times for teaching kids right now in this political atmosphere. We need love. Give us some love. So it really started off in high school. So I'm just going to take you and time travel back to when I kind of looked the same, but I was a lot younger and a lot dumber, and it was in high school, like many of us, we were confused, and we had an identity problem, and I was hyper introverted, and at the time we moved around a lot, and so finally when I get to this home base, I'm just processing everything, all the circumstances within my family, within my identity, and this is when I learned to love hip-hop. I would be the student that did not read books, and that was not good at math. I had my headphones in, sitting at the way back of the room, overtly ignoring my teacher and like hiding away in my black book. So that was me, and it was in that moment where I was introduced. Any Wu-Tang fans out there? To Jizza. Yeah, woo. I actually have people call me Bobby after Bobby Digital and RZA. But I fell in love with Jizza, to be honest, and it was at a time when I was getting discriminated against by my school administration. I was at continuation school, and this album spoke to me. It was the songs from Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth to Cold War to Lyrical Swords, where he talked not only about the crazy corruption of the world and society, putting all of just racial structures on blast, that, you know, these are experiences that I was harboring and didn't know how to process through. But the album also put self-discipline and character as a conversation that I was not really getting at home. And so when I first heard this album, I read my first book in high school. And so that begins my journey of what it was like for me to fall in love with hip hop. That sparked within me perspective that I did not know would connect me later on to my students 15 years later. So I currently teach in Compton. Many of us know Compton for the hip hop culture, but that's not why I moved there. I actually moved there because I wanted to be unionized as a teacher, and that was the job that gave me an opportunity first. And so when we first think about Compton, I know already a lot of you either thought gang violence or you thought NWA, Eazy-E, Kendrick Lamar, and Dre, right? I actually teach at the alma mater of Kendrick Lamar, so constantly reminded of this history. But what Compton really means to me is home. I moved to Compton because I love my students and their families. And when I think of Compton, I think of the ranches, the bodegas, my classroom, room 15, and the stories that are shared. It was in this moment that I also rekindled my love for hip hop. I've always been the teacher that snuck little snippets up here and there of like, let's analyze Tupac lyrics, and then conjoin them with the book that we're reading and use it as kind of like a sampler and engaging students. But it was last year that really struck a chord for me at the death of Nipsey Hussle. The morning after he was shot, I was distraught and I did not want to go to school. I was tempted to call off because of losing a community member as well as losing a role model that stood out not only to myself but to my students. I was nervous to confront the conversations that had to be had, and I did not know if I was one to facilitate them. I remember going into my first period class and committing to myself that that was going to be the first thing that I talked about. And so we circled up in a community circle, and it was one student of mine that shared a story about not only how much her sister was mourning and loving Nipsey, but how she would listen to one song every single day. Going to work, coming home, she would just listen to this one song. And I imagined her hustle, I imagined her struggle, and how those lyrics sparked in her power to just walk one more step and continue the marathon. When I heard that story, by that time, my student was already in tears, and I was almost in tears as I am now. Not only remembering a historical figure such as Nipsey, but remembering myself when I was in high school and how those lyrics spoke to me and gave me momentum to take a step forward and commit to not only being who I am in all of my crazy fullness, but committing to serving the community by any means necessary. So hip hop to me is more than just what we hear on the radio. Hip hop to me is more than just even the Wu-Tang Clan. I honestly don't even listen to them anymore. They sound a little angry now, now that I'm older. But really, like, Hip hop to me is a community, it's a movement, it's a commitment to social justice. It's a way for me to connect with my kids. To me, it's to not conform to the patterns of this world, but it's to choose to be in my purpose of serving and community activism. And so next time you hear a hip hop song, instead of categorizing them as a genre, this is really a lifestyle, a culture, and something that something that brings us all closer together. Thank you.